The humid summer air hung heavy with the cloying, almost suffocating scent of freshly cut pine needles from the ubiquitous, perfectly sculpted HOA mandated landscaping. It was a smell that, for Sarah Jensen, had long ceased to be pleasant, now serving only as a bitter reminder of endless conformity. But beneath that deceptive aroma lay the far more pervasive acidic tang of stale resentment, a miasma that had clung to Sarah like a second, oppressive skin for the better part of a decade and a half. Her blonde curls, usually a vibrant, rebellious mess that defied any attempt at perfect order, were now plastered to her forehead with sweat, clinging stubbornly despite her fatigued attempts to brush them away with the back of a dusty hand. Her fingers, sore, almost arthritic, from gripping endless cardboard boxes, twinged with every lift. Another box, this one deceptively light, labeled Kitchen Chaos, Do Not Open Until Caffeinated. Seriously, I mean it this time. My sanity depends on it. Slid onto the dolly with a tired scrape, its cardboard sides bowing slightly under the unseen, symbolic weight of countless forgotten gadgets, mismatched Tupperware, and the ghosts of hurried breakfasts, solitary dinners, and quiet, lonely mornings spent dreaming of escape. It was moving day finally, the dawn of a new era, a long-awaited liberation. After 15 grueling, often soul-crushing years of meticulously adhering to, or artfully circumventing, the endless arbitrary dictates of the Grandview Estates Homeowners Association, Sarah Jensen was breaking free. 15 years that had felt less like homeownership and more like a meticulously monitored suburban prison sentence, each day marked by 2 relentless mortgage payments, a creeping, pervasive sense of surveillance that prickled her skin, and a seemingly infinite parade of passive-aggressive notes about everything from the permissible shade of front door paint, only Grandview gray, or suburban beige allowed, lest one offend the delicate sensibilities of the neighborhood's self-appointed aesthetic police, to the exact height of shrubbery, no more than 36 inches, no less than 24, lest they appear wild or neglected and thus invite fines. The precise day recycling bins could be placed at the curb. Tuesday mornings no earlier than 6 a.m., no later than 787 a.m., lest one face an immediate citation. And the downright scandalous, unauthorized placement of holiday inflatables, her cheerful Santa on a jet ski, a defiant burst of individual holiday cheer in a sea of identical wreaths, had been a particularly costly and emotionally draining battle that she ultimately lost. Today, all that oppressive absurdity was ending. The chains were falling. Sarah Jensen was escaping the clutches of Grandview, and more specifically, the suffocating iron grip of Brenda Sterling, queen of the Grandview HOA, affectionately, or rather universally, derisively, and often whispered with a genuine shiver of dread, known as HOA Karen. Grandview Estates wasn't just a neighborhood, it was Brenda's personal fiefdom, a meticulously manicured kingdom over which she ruled with an unshakable belief in her own omnipotence, an almost divine right to dictate the lives of her subjects. Her reign was absolute, enforced by a relentless patrol of the streets, her keen eyes missing nothing, an encyclopedic, almost obsessive knowledge of the HOA bylaws, and a direct, seemingly ceaseless line to the association's management company, whom she often coerced into issuing fines based purely on her personal whims or perceived slights. For years, Sarah had navigated its labyrinthine rules, each one seemingly designed not for community harmony or aesthetic beauty, but to stifle individuality, punish creativity, and foster a pervasive sense of dread, conformity, and utter exhaustion that bled into every aspect of daily life. It started subtly enough. The initial joy of home ownership, the pride in her first house, a place of her own, a tangible symbol of her independence, gradually eroded by the constant vigilance required to avoid a fine, or worse, a direct, personal, and utterly humiliating confrontation with Brenda. The mere threat of a Brenda sighting, her perfectly coiffed silhouette appearing in a window, or her brisk, purposeful walk across the street, was enough to ruin a perfectly good Saturday, casting a pall over any nascent joy or spontaneous backyard barbecue. There was the infamous Great Gnomes debate of 2012, a saga that still made Sarah's left eye twitch involuntarily whenever she thought about it, a testament to the lingering trauma and absurdity. Her two cheerful ceramic garden gnomes, Norman and Gnorma, purchased on a whim from a charming roadside stand during a rare moment of defiant whimsy, a fleeting attempt to inject a bit of personality into her meticulously regulated yard, were deemed non-conforming decorative elements by Brenda herself, personally delivered via a stern, handwritten note on HOA letterhead, citing vague clauses about aesthetic consistency. This led to a ludicrous 6-month battle of increasingly stern, official-looking letters from the HOA, escalating fines that ate into Sarah's already tight grocery budget, turning milk and bread into luxuries, and eventually a tearful, ignominious surrender of Norman and Norma to the dark abyss of her garden shed, where they remained, silent, dusty martyrs to suburban tyranny, their cheerful grins now hidden from the sun, gathering cobwebs. Sarah even remembered contemplating a move then, but the market wasn't right, and the thought of starting over felt too daunting. Then came the recycling bin fiasco, a truly bizarre escalation that showcased Brenda's particular brand of overreach and her unsettling, almost pathological commitment to what she termed observational enforcement. Sarah had woken one morning, still groggy from a late-night packing session, her body aching, to find her perfectly good blue recycling bin sitting oddly askew at the curb, its contents visibly disturbed, almost rifled through, as if a small, obsessive bandit had plundered its depths in search of incriminating evidence. Tucked under a stray newspaper, precisely folded, was a small laminated card, printed in a severe sans serif font, stark against the recycled paper. Attention resident, unacceptable contamination detected. Item, unrinsed yogurt cup. Violation, Section 5.3, Waste Management Guidelines. This will result in a $50 fine. Continued non-compliance will result in escalated penalties and potential forfeiture of recycling privileges. Brenda had personally, meticulously gone through her recycling. It was a profound invasion of privacy, a chilling demonstration of Brenda's relentless, almost voyeuristic surveillance, a boundary crossed that had left Sarah feeling violated and exposed, her skin crawling with disgust. This constant low hum of anxiety, this perpetual awareness of being watched and judged, of her every mundane action being scrutinized and potentially penalized, had defined much of Sarah's adult life in this otherwise outwardly picturesque yet internally suffocating suburb. It was a golden cage, and Sarah was finally breaking free. Today, that hum was about to be silenced, hopefully for good, replaced by the blissful, liberating white noise of freedom, of anonymity, of simply being able to exist without a self-appointed warden meticulously cataloging her every perceived infraction. She craved a life where her biggest worry was what to cook for dinner, not whether her lawn was a quarter-inch too tall. Brenda's house, an architectural twin to Sarah's, but somehow more pristine, more unlived in, like a showroom model frozen in time, preserved under a vacuum seal, stood directly across the street. Its perfectly manicured lawn seemed to vibrate with unspoken judgment, every blade of grass seemingly aligned to maximize its disdain for Sarah's slightly less than perfect existence, her lived-in home, her slightly scuffed minivan. Its facade, with its meticulously painted trim and immaculately clean windows that reflected the summer sun in blinding glares, mocked Sarah's worn-out moving boxes and the glorious chaotic disarray of her life as it transitioned from one chapter to the next. Sarah had known, with a deep certainty that settled in her bones, a certainty born of years of unpleasant, escalating experience, that this day, her grand escape, wouldn't pass without a dramatic performance from Brenda. It was Brenda's modus operandi, her grand finale, her last desperate chance to assert authority over a departing subject, to remind Sarah one last time who held the reins in Grandview, even if only in her own deluded mind. It was a final, theatrical flourish before Sarah slipped away into the welcoming embrace of a new neighborhood with no HOA, no Brenda, and she hoped no gnomes-related controversies ever again. Sarah had mentally prepared for a minor skirmish, perhaps a complaint about the mover's parking technique or a demand for a final punitive lawn inspection designed to levy one last spiteful fine. She hadn't been disappointed. Brenda was nothing if not predictable in her outrage. The first incident was minor, almost quaint in its sheer pettiness, a mere prelude to the coming storm, like the first drop of rain before a hurricane. A delivery truck, slightly too large for the narrow tree-lined street that Grandview Estates proudly boasted, was designed for quiet residential enjoyment and optimal pedestrian flow, had briefly paused, its hazard lights blinking rhythmically, a momentary amber pulse against the vibrant green foliage as the weary driver checked his GPS. In that fleeting moment, it had inadvertently nosed just a few feet onto the edge of Brenda's perfectly manicured driveway, momentarily obscuring her pristine view of the street. A cardinal sin in Brenda's personal doctrine of aesthetic purity. It wasn't blocking it, not truly, just a fractional infringement, a momentary shadow on her perfect world. But in Brenda's rigidly ordered universe, mere proximity to imperfection was an egregious offense, a personal insult of the highest order, an act of war. Brenda had materialized from her garage with the alarming speed of a suburban wraith, clad in sensible beige capri and a perfectly pressed powder blue polo shirt, her phone already clutched in her hand like a weapon, her eyes narrowed to suspicious, beady slits. Her lips, usually pursed in disapproval, now formed a perfect O of outrage. "This is a private residential street. You're obstructing traffic. You are causing a public nuisance. You are disrupting the peace. I'm calling the police right now. I have witnesses. This is unacceptable," she'd shrieked, her voice echoing unnaturally in the quiet morning, cutting through the chirping of cicadas and the distant hum of lawnmowers like a rusty saw blade dragging across metal. The driver, bless his weary soul and his incredible saint-like patience, had barely registered her. His eyes already on his rearview mirror, already maneuvering the cumbersome vehicle back onto the asphalt with practiced ease. his face a mask of practiced indifference to the peculiar, localized dramas of suburbia. Sarah, hauling a stack of old photo albums that felt heavier than lead, weighed down by memories and the dust of years, had just sighed, a long, drawn-out exhalation of resignation that seemed to carry all 15 years of Grandview's petty tyrannies, all the small humiliations and frustrations that had chipped away at her spirit, leaving her feeling brittle. Just another Tuesday in Brenda's world, a world where the slightest deviation from her unspoken, unattainable perfection was cause for immediate, high-decibel intervention, a frantic call to arms, or in this case, a frantic histrionic call to the police, all for a minor, momentary inconvenience. But that was just the appetizer. A small amuse-bouche of Brenda's burgeoning fury, a mere drop in the overflowing bucket of her manufactured outrage. The main course of Brenda's unbridled indignation arrived an hour later, with a dramatic flourish that even Brenda couldn't have choreographed more perfectly, a crescendo of suburban discord in the form of the truly colossal moving truck from Smooth Moves Co. It was a veritable behemoth of white and green steel, emblazoned with the cheerful, yet now ironically named, company logo, a symbol of transition that Brenda clearly interpreted as an invasion. The truck barely fit on the street without its massive tires threatening to crush the delicate fringes of anyone's perfectly edged lawn, a logistical challenge that even the most skilled and patient driver would struggle with on Grandview's narrow, winding roads, designed more for golf carts than commercial vehicles. Its sheer, imposing size dwarfed the neighboring houses, casting long, shifting shadows that Brenda no doubt found aesthetically displeasing, a direct affront to the neighborhood's harmonious sight lines and consistent architectural scale. But Brenda saw it differently. She didn't see a necessary inconvenience, a temporary disruption for a legitimate purpose, a fleeting moment of necessary chaos that would soon pass. She saw a direct assault on the very fabric of Grandview Estate's meticulously enforced aesthetic, a brazen challenge to her authority that simply could not stand, an undeniable opportunity for one last glorious display of power and control over the departing Sarah Jensen. "Ms. Jensen!" Brenda's voice, shrill enough to shatter glass, sharp and piercing, cut through the sounds of furniture being dragged, boxes being taped, and the mover's good-natured, albeit strained, banter. It sliced through the afternoon air like a surgical blade. Sarah, struggling with the surprisingly heavy antique chest that had belonged to her grandmother, a chest that seemed to embody the weight of generations of accumulated possessions and memories, each one now a burdensome anchor, symbolizing the past she was finally shedding, straightened up with a grunt, her back aching, wincing visibly at the piercing sound. Your vehicle is in blatant violation of Article 7, subsection B of the Grandview Estates Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. No commercial vehicles exceeding 25 feet in length are permitted on residential roads for more than 4 hours within a 24-hour period. This truck, by my estimation, is at least 50 feet. I've been timing it precisely with my stopwatch. It's been here for 2 hours and 16 minutes, and you haven't even applied for a special waiver, as required by the Temporary Construction and Large Vehicle Addendum of 2018, which clearly states a 72-hour prior notice must be submitted to the HOA board for approval and a non-refundable permit fee of $250 must be paid, she declared, her eyes gleaming with a fanatic's conviction, her posture rigid with self-importance, her finger jabbing the air as if delivering a decree from on high, a final, unappealable judgment. Sarah stared at her, an incredulous, almost hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat, quickly suppressed before it could escape and ignite further fury. "Brenda, it's a moving truck. I'm moving out. This is literally the only reason it's here. Do you expect me to move my entire life, 15 years worth of belongings, in a minivan? Or perhaps by bicycle, carrying one box at a time for months on end? Are you suggesting I simply teleport my belongings, or perhaps have a series of tiny HOA-approved trucks make 1,000 trips?" The sarcasm dripped from her voice, heavy and bitter like old medicine. But Brenda seemed utterly immune to it, her self-absorption a protective, impenetrable shield against logic or reason, reflecting back only her own warped sense of order. "Ignorance of the rules is no excuse, Ms. Jensen." Brenda puffed out her chest, a small triumphant smirk playing on her lips, as if she'd just caught Sarah red-handed in a heinous crime, something akin to grand larceny or defacing a national monument with spray paint and neon lights. "I've already notified the board, though I suspect they are as lax and irresponsible as ever, which is precisely why I have to take matters into my own hands. And I have, moments ago, contacted the local authorities again, for the second time today. This is a clear infraction that threatens the integrity of our property values, the peace and quiet of our community, and frankly, my personal enjoyment of my property, which I work tirelessly to maintain and which you are now ruining." She gestured vaguely, almost grandiosely, at Sarah's slightly overgrown rose bushes, which, in Brenda's eyes, constituted a wild, untamed jungle, an affront to civilization, and had been a constant, thorny point of contention for years. Then her gaze swept to a minor, weeks-old oil stain on the driveway from a recent frantic car repair, a mark that Brenda clearly considered a permanent, unsightly scar on the pristine face of Grandview. A blight that would surely send property values plummeting and spark a neighborhood revolt. "It's about maintaining community standards, Ms. Jensen, something you've consistently failed to do. Your very presence has been a blight upon this pristine neighborhood, a constant source of nonconformity and chaos, and frankly, a personal insult to my dedication." Sarah simply rolled her eyes, a gesture Brenda, thankfully, didn't seem to notice in her self-righteous fervor. "You called the police again because of a moving truck, Brenda?" she repeated, genuinely astonished by the sheer audacity, the bottomless well of petty outrage that Brenda seemed to possess. It was beyond parody, a performance so over the top it veered into the surreal, a tragic comedy playing out on her front lawn. "It's not just the truck, Ms. Jensen, it's the cumulative effect. The noise, the disruption, the blatant lack of respect for procedure. You never filed for a temporary parking permit for a commercial vehicle, which is clearly outlined in Appendix C, Section 4, Paragraph D, Subparagraph 2, which explicitly states a 72-hour prior notice must be submitted to the HOA board for approval." Brenda was working herself into a magnificent frenzy, her face blotchy with anger, her voice rising in pitch with each sentence, nearing a truly hysterical register, a cacophony of indignation that grated on Sarah's last nerve. She waved a hand dismissively at the movers, who continued to load boxes with practiced indifference, their faces stoic, their movements efficient, as if Brenda were merely a buzzing fly they wished to swat away, an annoying background noise, and your movers are playing loud, inappropriate music. I can hear that. That rap music from my living room. It's violent and uncouth. It's vibrating my windows. This is a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood. We have children here who are trying to nap. It's a disturbance of the peace, a clear violation of our noise ordinances, and frankly, a sign of disrespect for everyone in this community, she wailed, clutching at her chest dramatically. As if suffering a heart attack from the sheer audacity of it all, her body trembling with manufactured indignation. I will not stand for it. The movers exchanged glances, a mixture of amusement, profound exasperation, and a simmering desire to just finish the job and get out of this bizarre suburban purgatory in their eyes. They were clearly used to eccentric homeowners and the bizarre theatrical dramas that often unfolded on moving day, a common occupational hazard. They kept working, albeit a little faster, their movements efficient and focused, a silent, practiced protest against Brenda's escalating tirade. Sarah, too, decided to ignore Brenda, a strategy she'd perfected over a decade and a half, a finely tuned skill born of pure necessity and self-preservation. She just needed to get through the next couple of hours, to endure Brenda's final, vitriolic performance. She just needed to be gone. She pictured her new quiet apartment, the blissful silence, the absence of Brenda's constant scrutiny, the freedom to choose her own paint colors and display as many gnomes as her heart desired without fear of reprisal. The thought was a sweet, distant melody. 2 hours later, just as the last of the big furniture, a bulky sectional sofa that had seen countless family movie nights, countless spilled snacks, and countless hours of comfortable oblivion, was being laboriously wheeled up the ramp into the cavernous truck. The distinct rising whine of a police siren pierced the quiet afternoon. It started faint, almost indistinguishable from a distant ice cream truck's jingle or the wail of an ambulance far away on the main highway, then grew steadily louder, closer, resolving into the unmistakable, official, and utterly unwelcome wail of law enforcement right on their quiet suburban street. Sarah's heart sank, a heavy mix of annoyance, a weary despair, and a perverse sense of validation settling like a stone in her stomach. Of course, Brenda had actually done it. She had called the real police, not just threatened to. She always followed through on her threats, no matter how outlandish, no matter how petty. 2 gleaming patrol cars, their sirens now mercifully silent, their polished surfaces reflecting the summer sky, and the bewildered expressions of Sarah and her movers, pulled up to the curb, parking directly behind the colossal moving truck. Lights flashed in a silent, rhythmic pulse, painting the scene in alternating blue and red hues, casting an almost surreal glow over the mundane act of moving, transforming it into a scene from a low-budget drama. The sirens died, leaving an awkward, sudden quiet, broken only by the rhythmic creak of the moving truck's ramp, the hushed murmurs of the bewildered movers, and the triumphant, panting breaths of Brenda Sterling, who seemed to inflate with self-importance at the sight of the squad cars. Officer Miller, a young, earnest cop with a fresh haircut and a slightly bewildered, almost apologetic expression etched on his face, and his partner, Officer Jenkins, a seasoned veteran with weary, intelligent eyes that had clearly seen it all and then some, stepped out. They moved with the unhurried, almost resigned efficiency of those accustomed to handling absurd neighborhood disputes and the unique, often comical eccentricities of suburban HOA life. "Ma'am, we received a call about a large commercial vehicle obstructing traffic and violating HOA ordinances," Officer Miller began, his gaze sweeping over the scene, taking in the massive moving truck, the scattered boxes, the bewildered movers, and the tense, palpable standoff between Sarah and a clearly triumphant Brenda. He seemed a little bewildered by the sheer triviality of the crime for which they had been dispatched, his brow furrowed in a slight frown of confusion and perhaps mild frustration, already anticipating another waste of police resources. "That would be her!" Brenda shrieked, seizing the opportunity to be the aggrieved party, her voice cutting through the air like a freshly sharpened knife, dripping with a venomous satisfaction, a triumphant battle cry. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger directly at Sarah, her face flushed a furious, blotchy red with righteous indignation and pure, unadulterated triumph. She'd been a menace since she moved in. Loud parties, unapproved paint colors, unkempt landscaping, and now this monstrosity violating every single bylaw. It's a complete disregard for community living and our property values. I've been living a nightmare next to her for years. It's been an absolute ordeal. My peace has been shattered, my enjoyment of my home compromised. My property value has plummeted because of her. She paced back and forth slightly, puffed up with self-importance, relishing the unexpected spotlight, feeling utterly vindicated by the presence of law enforcement. "And I've warned her, repeatedly, sent her countless notices, but she just ignores me. She thinks she's above the rules, above Grandview Estates, above me. She's a scofflaw." Officer Jenkins, however, wasn't looking at Sarah or the truck or even the absurdly agitated Brenda. His gaze was fixed solely and intently on Brenda Sterling. His eyes, which had seemed weary just moments before, now held a glint of recognition, a flicker of memory, then something akin to grim satisfaction, a quiet, almost imperceptible hardening of his jawline. A small, almost imperceptible nod passed between him and Officer Miller, a silent communication that excluded Brenda entirely, a shared understanding of what was about to unfold. He seemed to be replaying something in his mind, a long dormant file clicking open in his mental database, the pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. He recognized the name and the face and the particular unmistakable brand of shrill, unfounded complaint that had plagued their department for years. "Brenda Sterling?" Officer Jenkins' voice was low, devoid of emotion, a stark, chilling contrast to Brenda's high-pitched squawking, a tone that sent a distinct shiver down Sarah's spine despite herself. He pulled out a small notepad, but his eyes never left her face, watching her with a calm, almost predatory intensity that made her preening falter, a faint seed of doubt finally taking root in her triumphant mind, slowly turning to apprehension, then fear. Brenda, completely missing the subtle, ominous shift in the officer's demeanor, still basking in the glow of official attention, preened. "Yes, officer. I'm Brenda Sterling, head of the HOA Architectural Review Committee and a long-standing, dedicated, and very respected member of this community. I'm glad you're finally addressing this blatant disregard for our community guidelines. It's been a long time coming. This woman has caused nothing but trouble and discord since the day she moved in. She needs to be taught a lesson about respecting her neighbors and the rules. She needs to be punished for her insolence and defiance. She smoothed down her perfectly pressed blouse, a self-satisfied smile playing on her lips, as if she were about to accept an award for distinguished community service, entirely unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface of Officer Jenkins' placid expression, a storm that was about to break right over her. Just then, as Brenda was mid-sentence, pontificating about the importance of cohesive aesthetics and the dire need for strict enforcement, her voice reaching a crescendo of indignation, a sleek black unmarked SUV pulled up silently behind the patrol cars. It was so nondescript, so professional, so utterly out of place for a mundane moving day dispute that it initially went unnoticed by Brenda, whose self-important attention was fully absorbed by the two uniformed officers. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a sharp, dark suit and expensive-looking sunglasses stepped out. He moved with an air of quiet authority, a subtle gravitas that instantly drew the attention of the uniformed officers and finally Sarah. He surveyed the scene, his eyes immediately finding Sarah, then Brenda, then Officer Jenkins, before settling purposefully on the latter. He took off his sunglasses, revealing a pair of intelligent, piercing blue eyes that held a familiar spark, a knowing glint, a hint of something deeper, something that made Sarah's heart pound with a sudden, unbidden hope. "Mom," he called out, his voice strong and clear, carrying easily across the short distance, a warm, genuine smile breaking across his face, a smile that transformed his serious, professional demeanor into something undeniably familiar and profoundly comforting. Sarah's jaw dropped, her earlier annoyance and lingering despair momentarily forgotten, replaced by sheer astonishment that stole her breath, leaving her speechless. "Alex, what are you doing here?" Her son, Alex Jensen, was a detective with the county sheriff's department, notoriously busy, a man whose schedule was dictated by the unpredictable rhythm of criminal investigations, often working late into the night. He was supposed to be working, knee-deep in a high-profile case involving a string of complex burglaries he'd only vaguely mentioned over hurried phone calls, always prefacing it with, "Can't talk much, Mom. Active investigation, top priority. Don't want to compromise anything." He certainly wasn't supposed to be showing up unannounced in an unmarked vehicle on her moving day, looking like he'd just stepped out of a procedural drama's casting call, perfectly coiffed and utterly composed, a true force of calm. Brenda's triumphant smirk faltered, her face slowly deflating as she stared at Alex, then back at Sarah, a confused frown creasing her brow, battling with the triumph still lingering there, a desperate struggle for composure. The blood drained from her face, leaving it ashen, replaced by a look of bewildered confusion, then dawning horror as the pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The professional suit, the unmarked car, the familiar, almost brotherly interaction with the uniformed officer. It all added up to something far more sinister for Brenda than a simple dispute. Your son?" she stammered, her voice suddenly much smaller, stripped of its usual venom and authority, trembling faintly, a pathetic squeak compared to her earlier shrieks. Her eyes darted frantically from Alex to Officer Jenkins, a flicker of understanding, and then pure, unadulterated panic, taking hold as the terrifying realization solidified into a horrifying, inescapable truth. Her mouth opened and closed silently like a fish out of water. Alex walked over, his stride confident and purposeful, giving his mom a quick hug and a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. a gesture of silent support that grounded Sarah in the surreal moment, a reminder that this was real. Couldn't let you move without some moral support, Mom. You know I always show up when you need me, especially for big life events. Plus, heard you were having issues with a certain HOA president, he said, his tone light but his eyes serious, almost cold, as they flickered to Brenda and then back to Officer Jenkins. A silent understanding, years in the making, a shared burden finally lifting, passed between the two law enforcement officers. Alex's gaze held a shared history, a quiet acknowledgement of a long-awaited moment, a collective sigh of relief that was almost palpable, a silent high five between colleagues who had patiently waited for their opportunity. Officer Jenkins nodded almost imperceptibly, a confirmation of that silent understanding, a signal that the moment was ripe. He holstered his notepad, his expression now completely serious, his earlier weariness replaced by a focused resolve, a grim determination that bespoke years of patience and accumulated frustration with Brenda Sterling. Brenda Sterling, he repeated, his voice firm, clear, and utterly devoid of compassion, pulling out a pair of gleaming handcuffs from his belt with a practiced motion. The metallic click echoed unnaturally loud in the sudden, absolute stillness of the afternoon, a punctuation mark on Brenda's reign, a sound that seemed to shatter the very air. "You're under arrest." Brenda's face, already red from her earlier outburst, turned a mottled, sickly purple, almost apoplectic with shock and fury, a grotesque mask of disbelief. Her eyes bulged like a startled frog's, fixated first on the handcuffs, then on Jenkins, then on Alex, a desperate, frantic plea in their widening depths. "Arrest? For what? I'm the victim here. She's violating HOA rules. I called you. This is a mistake. You have the wrong person. This is an outrage. You can't arrest me. I'm a pillar of this community. I volunteer. I bake cookies for the bake sale. I'm on 3 committees. I know the mayor." She stumbled backward a step, completely disoriented by the sudden dramatic reversal of fortune, her carefully constructed world tilting violently on its axis, threatening to collapse entirely into a heap of shattered bylaws and unrinsed yogurt cups. Her voice, once shrill and authoritative, was now a strangled squawk of disbelief, her protests becoming more desperate, higher-pitched, and less coherent with each frantic breath. "No, Ms. Sterling," Officer Jenkins stated calmly, his voice cutting through Brenda's rising panic like a surgeon's scalpel, sharp and precise, allowing no room for argument or negotiation. "You're under arrest for an outstanding warrant for multiple counts of harassment, stalking, and filing false police reports. These charges primarily stem from incidents involving your former neighbors on Elm Street, specifically the Millers and the Chungs, dating back several years. We've compiled extensive reports from other neighborhoods as well, patterns of strikingly similar behavior across multiple communities you've resided in, each time leaving a trail of victimized neighbors. We've also added charges related to today's incident, as your call was found to be without legitimate cause and constituted a clear misuse of emergency services. We have extensive documentation, corroborated witness statements, sworn affidavits, and even recordings of your past, non-emergency call logs, detailing a clear, disturbing, and sustained pattern of malicious behavior and abuse of the system, Ms. Sterling. It's all here, meticulously documented." He looked directly at Alex, a slight, knowing nod, acknowledging the joint effort, the culmination of a tedious, drawn-out investigation that had finally borne fruit, a collective triumph for justice. Detective Jensen, it's been a long time coming. We've had a file on her for months, meticulously building the case based on a clear, escalating pattern of abusive and litigious behavior, a classic serial nuisance who believes the law applies to everyone but herself. Turns out your mom's moving day was just the last straw we needed for her to trip up publicly, providing us with the final, irrefutable pieces of actionable evidence needed for the warrant to be served. Brenda's eyes, wide with disbelief and a growing, desperate fear that was now pure terror, darted frantically between Alex and Jenkins, searching for an escape, a loophole, a glimmer of mercy, anything to cling to. Elm Street? That was years ago. They were the ones breaking the rules. The Millers had an untamed dog that barked incessantly at all hours, disturbing the peace of the entire block. The Chungs left their trash cans out overnight, attracting vermin and lowering property values. I was simply trying to maintain order, to uphold community standards, to protect my investment and my neighbors' investments. I was being a good citizen. This is outrageous. This is a conspiracy. You're all in on it. This is political. I know my rights. You can't do this. I'll sue the department. I'll sue the HOA. I'll sue everyone in this entire county. I'll go to the press. I'll expose all of you. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, he will have a field day with this. You don't know who you're dealing with. She started sputtering, her carefully constructed composure crumbling entirely, replaced by a desperate, frantic energy, her hands flailing wildly, clawing at the air as if trying to grasp at fleeting vestiges of her shattered authority, her voice dissolving into a gurgling, incoherent mess. Her accusations, once sharp and precise, dissolved into a nonsensical torrent of grievances, a pathetic, high-pitched whine that was barely articulate, merely a series of frantic, self-pitying gasps. "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Miller recited, stepping forward to assist, his earlier confusion replaced by a solemn professionalism, his movements precise, almost clinical, as Jenkins expertly cuffed Brenda's wrists behind her back. The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs was definitive, final, the sound of a chapter slamming shut with irreversible finality. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you." Brenda continued to protest, her words dissolving into incoherent, indignant squawks, muffled whimpers, and desperate pleas as she was gently but firmly guided towards the back of Officer Jenkins' patrol car. Her perfect hair, once meticulously coiffed, was now wildly disheveled, strands escaping her tightly bound ponytail and sticking to her sweaty temples, and her perfectly pressed blouse seemed to ripple with her contained fury, a losing battle against the cold, hard reality of her situation. She tried to pull away, to resist, to assert her will, but the officers were calm, immovable, efficient, a force she could not overcome, her struggle only serving to underscore her rapidly diminishing control. As Officer Jenkins helped the now flailing, squawking Brenda into the back seat of his patrol car, her cries muffled by the closing door, silencing her tirade for good, Alex put an arm around his stunned mother, a comforting, grounding weight that pulled her back to reality. "Looks like you won't have to worry about HOA Karen anymore, Mom," he said, a wry, almost tired smile touching his lips, tinged with a deep, quiet satisfaction that resonated with Sarah. We've been building a case on her for a while. She's got a history, a long one, of this kind of harassment, dating back years, across multiple neighborhoods she's lived in. The Elm Street neighbors had been trying to get her for ages, filing countless complaints, dealing with her petty vendettas, her bizarre acts of surveillance, her constant threats. But she was always just careful enough to stay on the right side of the law, or just barely over the line, without solid, irrefutable proof that would stand up in court. Today, though, her absolute certainty that she was in the right, her unshakable hubris, and her willingness to blatantly misuse emergency services and publicly harass you finally gave us the actionable evidence we needed to show her consistent pattern of behavior and abuse of the system. She walked right into it, Mom. Her own undoing. It was a beautiful thing to witness, truly. Sarah watched the two patrol cars drive away, their lights still flashing silently, a beacon of justice in the afternoon sun, diminishing into the distance until they were mere specks. Brenda's muffled protests, though faint, were still faintly audible for a few moments, a receding echo of her reign of terror, a last dying gasp of her tyranny, before finally fading entirely into the distance, carrying with them 15 years of manufactured drama, of petty grievances, of suffocating rules, of unrinsed yogurt cups. A profound, almost sacred quiet peace began to settle over Grandview Estates, a palpable shift in the air, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. Neighbors, who had been watching from behind curtains, began to emerge, offering Sarah tentative smiles, a shared sense of liberation passing between them. Sarah looked at her son, a hero in a dark suit, then back at her now half-empty house, the remaining boxes seeming impossibly lighter, the air suddenly fresher, cleaner, imbued with a liberating sense of possibility and infinite peace. A huge, relieved smile spread across her face, a genuine, unburdened smile that hadn't graced her features in years, a smile that reached her eyes and made them sparkle with genuine joy, with a future she hadn't dared to fully imagine. "You know, son," she said, squeezing his arm, her voice thick with emotion, a lightness she hadn't felt in years bubbling up inside her, a monumental weight finally lifted. "I think this move just got a whole lot smoother, and a whole lot more satisfying. It's like the universe knew I needed a grand finale of my own, a truly spectacular one, the very best moving day present a mother could ask for." The moving truck's engine rumbled to life with a hopeful roar, a powerful symbolic sound of departure, ready to carry her to a new, truly HOA-free beginning, leaving the ghost of Brenda Sterling and the oppressive memory of Grandview Estates firmly and irrevocably in her rearview mirror, never ever to trouble her again. The sun seemed to shine brighter,